have a rather unusual show today. With all the spooky movies and things going on lately, I thought it might be nice to contact someone from the dead. Now, we've been talking recently about unusual creative process, and one of the most famous directors for an unusual creative process would be Stanley Kubrick. He's known for such films as Spartacus, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Lolita, A Clockwork Orange, The Shining. So today we have our friend Stephen who's come into the studio. Hi Stephen.
Hello.
Hi. Stephen is a medium and he has been able to make contact with the spirit of Stanley Kubrick, and he's going to channel him for us today.
Hi there.
Hi
I'm
Mr.
Stanley
Kubrick. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Now, of all the films that you've done, which one would you say is your own personal favourite?
I think my most accomplished film is certainly 2001: Space Odyssey, for it was completely revelatory at the time. It revolutionised how people thought about filmmaking, how people thought about science fiction, and it really did away with the whole three-act structure, traditional storytelling. It just completely did away with that and told a more visceral, visual experience.
Was that a dream of yours, to do something in a different way to everybody else?
Well, I always tried to do something that was completely out there. In all of my works, I tried to do something that was new and innovative and original. And so 2001 was no different, but it was certainly one that stood out amongst them.
So you like to do things a bit differently from other people, you like to leave your own mark behind. Are you that way with your personal life? Do you go about things a little bit differently than everyone else? Or would you say when you're at home you're just your average guy?
When I'm at home, I just try to live a normal life. I try to keep my filmmaking career and my personal life quite separate. I don't actually like being in the spotlight in my personal life.
Your last marriage lasted 41 years. Now that's quite an accomplishment. How did you manage that?
Well, it's all about caring about your partner, loving them, but having a mutual respect for each other. If a marriage isn't built on mutual respect, it's doomed from the beginning. And I feel that people shouldn't rush into marriage so quickly. But when you find the right one, you know, and that's how I felt.
Mm-hmm. During your life, obviously, you had 2 other wives to begin with, but those marriages were quite short. Your last marriage, like I say, lasted a really long time. Do you think that's due to the fact that celebrity lives weren't as splashed all over the papers as they are today?
Oh, definitely, from what I've seen, it's a much different situation than it was back when I was alive. A lot of times people are marrying now for status and as if it was a publicity stunt, when people should really be marrying for love. And I don't think people are doing that quite as often anymore, certainly in the celebrity world.
That's beautiful. What advice would you give your 2 daughters that you left behind and your stepdaughter?
Follow your dreams. Don't let people tell you what to do, and certainly don't let them tell you what you can't do. Because if you have the drive and motivation to do something, nobody should get in the way of that.
That's beautiful. Obviously, you and your family, this is your 3rd wife as well, and your children and your stepchildren, you moved through to England in 1962 to a beautiful estate to film Lolita. How did you find the move across?
Well, obviously it's a bit of culture shock, but I've always kind of been fascinated with the British culture, and it's really an interesting place, especially for an American to come over, because it's a bit more civilised and polite and cultured. And the move across was obviously life-changing, but it was definitely not something I regretted for a second.
The decision to make Lolita, was that for the shock value? You know, the movie, in case any of you don't know, is about a young girl. She's about 14, and she's quite promiscuous and quite flirty. And this man goes to rent a room at the house that she lives in, and he ends up marrying the mother. But he ends up kind of obsessed with Lolita. They do end up having an affair. Now, obviously, there was a later movie that was a lot more graphic, and it wasn't done quite as tastefully as Your Lolita. But Your Lolita was still extremely shocking at the time. You know, a movie with that kind of content in the 60s was mind-blowing. The tagline that you came up with for the movie was actually, how did they ever make a movie out of Lolita? And what was that like for the people around you, you know, your family, your friends, to deal with that?
Well, obviously when I set out to do Lolita, I was really inspired by the book, and that was a shocking book. The writing is incredible in it. Obviously we had some studio decisions, because in the book Lolita was 12, and obviously we upped the age a wee bit so it's a bit more acceptable. So we didn't really do it entirely for the shock value. We did it because it's a really gripping storyline. It's really quite a tense and stressful film, and the story is really about this one man's descent into obsession and how it ends up tearing apart his life. And in many ways it's about all love, and certainly the love for someone who doesn't reciprocate that love, they don't bring it back, and how harmful that can be to someone's life. So while it was shocking, we didn't do it entirely for the shock value.
For instance, the first, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there, because the first scene that we see Lolita in, she's lying around in the garden in a bikini. You know, that to see a 14-year-old girl, because the actress that played her was actually 14, which I'm guessing you did for authenticity, that was quite shocking in the 60s, to see a girl that age in a bikini on the screen. So, are you sure you weren't just trying to shock people, make them look at you, go, pay attention to me?
Well, obviously we did. We tried to change people's perception of films. We're trying to push new boundaries. Well, I certainly didn't do the film purely for shock value, because I don't think someone should make a film for pure shock value. When I explored this realm from the great films like Saw, and those films are made with no real creative taste, just for pure shock. They want to shock people. I feel Lolita had a lot of substance to it, so it wasn't just for the shock value. Obviously it's a shocking film, and it really should be that way. It's meant to make people think and alarm them and make them feel certain ways, but it certainly wasn't intended purely on the shock value.
Well, I'll take Lolita over Saw any day. Now, a kind of controversy that surrounded the film to begin with, obviously, was the kind of strange life imitating art story of your original lead man. Now, originally Errol Flynn was up for the role of Humbert Humbert, who is the main guy in the film, but just as filming was due to start, he got accused of statutory rape of some underage girls. Now, Flynn was acquitted at trial, but do you think that there maybe was something that drew him to that role? Or do you think it was just a horrible coincidence that he would be accused of something like that at the time?
I feel it was a coincidence, actually. I certainly wouldn't have liked to work with someone who actually was involved in that. And obviously it is quite a edgy role to play. It's a dangerous role to play, certainly. It can affect someone's psyche. But if he was drawn to it for that reason, I would not have wanted him to be in the film at all, and had I known that, I would not have even considered him.
Well, the man that you chose to replace him, James Mason, did a fantastic job of portraying such a torn character. How did your wife and your friends feel about the film as a whole and the controversy surrounding it with Errol Flynn?
Certainly they weren't too happy about it. They were quite alarmed, actually, that I could have even been involved with someone who was involved in that one. And obviously there was a few raised eyebrows with him. They were saying, oh, I'm making a film about paedophiles, working with people who might be paedophiles, but they were quite alarmed, justifiably, but they certainly didn't treat you as if you were a monster.
Yeah.
So they allowed you to explain yourself.
There was a lot of support for you during that time.
Yes.
People knew that you had nothing to do with it. Speaking of your friends, I know that you and Steven Spielberg were good friends, and that you originally brought the idea for AI, with artificial intelligence, to him. Now, Artificial Intelligence is a movie about these androids, or I don't know if that's the right word. They look like people, but inside they're really robots. And his version came out after you died, and it was a lovely little movie. You know, there was a few sad parts, but it wasn't really that dark. Do you think if you had managed to get your hands on it and complete it before you died, it would have taken a slightly different direction?
No, definitely I would have. Originally, when I was intending to do it, and really what I wanted to do was quite revolutionary at the time, and it has been done massively, but only last year did it come out. The idea I wanted to do was like the film Boyhood that came out in 2014, and I wanted to film this AI growing up, how he would interact with the world, and to his teenage years. Well, teenage years has been an AI, but he would have grown and all that. And I feel it would have been a darker film, because it would have dealt with how society was rejecting it, and Steven Spielberg is a
He's kind
fantastic
of a
director.
more kid-friendly director these days, isn't
Certainly, he's a very Hollywood director. In a lot of these films, they are. And I adore the man's work, but certainly films like Jurassic Park and Jaws, certainly groundbreaking. They are traditional cinema. That's what I expect a blockbuster film to be, and obviously bits of that bled into his depiction of AI.
Well, speaking of darker movies and your creative process, there are those that would say that sometimes you may have blurred the line between your own genius and maybe a little bit of insanity, just with some of the things that you did on set. For example, in Clockwork Orange, Malcolm McDowell received 2 injuries. The scene where he's being subjected to the brainwashing, he's got those metal hooks in his eyelids to keep his eyes open, and he actually, they hurt his eyes, they scratched his cornea and that. And the scene where he gets kicked by someone when he's on the ground, he actually broke his ribs. Do you think you went a little bit too far for authenticity, or do you think that's just exactly what the movie needed, and that the injuries were unhappy side effects?
I think it was because of they were unhappy side effects, but the authenticity was a necessity. It was something I needed to make that film so raw and visceral. obviously I never set out to hurt Malcolm, I adore Malcolm, but his devotion to the film as well was incredible. He kind of shook it off, he was still highly involved in the project, so when someone takes 2 injuries like that, you would have thought they would have been
up in arms.
Yeah, up in arms, wanting to leave the project, but no, he was really good about it, and I feel he could see the value of that project. He could see what that film meant, and yeah, it was just it was an unhappy accident, but in the end, the film benefited, and Malcolm wasn't seriously injured forever. He recovered and living a normal life now. So,
when you say that you adore Malcolm, how do you feel about Shelley Duvall, the actress from The Shining? I hear that things were quite unpleasant on set for her, but that may have been not due to you disliking her, but on purpose, so that she would be on edge all the time.
oh, certainly, Shelley was a fantastic actress, but she was lacking something that I needed for The Shining. But it was there in her, and I feel when she was subjected to that sort of psychological abuse, which I feel slightly guilty about now, but
At the time you
yeah,
needed
I
to get it.
needed that project, and I think Shelley's came to accept that that was what the project needed, and she's even said that she thanked me for pushing it to the edge, and you'll agree her performance was incredible, and it was totally worth all the little psychological abuse, because it's, in the end, it is only temporary, the abuse, but the film will last forever.
It will, and her performance was outstanding. I know the scene with the baseball bat where she's trying to defend herself. She's crying. She really looks like she's had no sleep in a month. She's absolutely terrified, and that is the most genuinely terrified I've ever seen someone. And I heard that was due to you making her reshoot that same screaming, crying scene over 100 times. Is that true?
Yes, I have been known to be a bit of a perfectionist, but
you got her there.
yeah, I got there in the end, and it was just searching for that perfect take. That the amount of takes before it led up to that perfect one, they influenced it and made that final perfect shot.
You definitely seem to inspire loyalty from those that you work with.
Certainly.
Another one of your movies, Full Metal Jacket, is absolutely renowned for its authenticity. People are obsessed with how real that film is. Now, the part of the film that takes part, and it's supposed to be in an abandoned, kind of half destroyed town. Instead of finding ruins to shoot in, you actually took a wrecking ball to an existing abandoned town. Do you think that was a step too far? Do you think that was just you flexing your budget muscles, or do you think that you had a vision and that you needed to see it happen?
Well, the thing is, if you find ruins to shoot in, the ruins are memories from an experience that happened long ago. They're the scarred remains of that, but this is more like a fleshy wound. It was a wound that is fresh and still there and still bleeding and hurting, and that's what I wanted the environment to look like. It looks like it had just happened like a few hours ago, maybe a few days ago, but that is the horror of the war. People aren't as alarmed by old ruins as they are by seeing things that look like they've just been destroyed.
And where the dust hasn't settled and
Exactly.
things like that. That is fantastic. That is the most genuine, heartfelt reason I've ever heard for anyone destroying a building. Now, you are often perceived as a little bit wacky, a little bit on edge because of your creative process. But are you aware of the various conspiracy theories that surround you?
I've heard a few.
For instance, your 2001 Space Odyssey film, people say that's actually built on your fear of the company IBM. and how much that they were progressing at the time?
Well, no. Well, I wouldn't like to comment too much, but HAL is named after heuristic algorithms, not because it is three letters.
Not because each letter is one letter away from IBM in the alphabet. There have been discoveries, obviously, since HD's really come into the mainstream and your movie got released on HD. People have managed to freeze frame and zoom in, and you know the guy where he's floating through that room, up the walls and that, and they've actually zoomed in, and you can see that on his sleeve it actually says IBM. Do you think that was... Did you put that in on purpose, thinking that no one would ever see it because of the quality of films at the time, and it would be your own little in-joke?
In many ways, yes and no. I knew that eventually someone would find that. Probably long after I'd gone. But it brings... It's maybe a benchmark to see how good a film mine would be. Because if anybody noticed it, it would mean people were still watching that film, and it would be a timeless classic, like at the time it had reached that point.
Well, it certainly is. You know, no one can argue with that. There's also the theory that you used part of the set when you were filming 2001: Space Odyssey to fake the moon landings for NASA.
Well, I think most people can agree that we actually did go to the moon. I would be honoured if they'd asked me to direct the moon landing, but it was... I don't really like flying, so I don't think I would be too keen on getting the spaceship up to the actual set where it happened.
Right, that's brilliant. So wacky conspiracy theories aside, we've had a great discussion about your creative process, about the way that your specific mindset works when it comes to your movies and what it is that you're trying to achieve. So thank you very much, Mr. Kubrick.
You're very welcome.
You can leave now and let Stephen come back.
I'm going to wander the earth for a little while more. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Hey Stephen.
Right.
How are you feeling?
That was surreal.
You challenged the Cookie Monster instead.
Oh well.
Right, thank you very much and goodbye.